Well, welcome everyone. I feel very privileged today to be introducing my friend and colleague, Clemente Lisi. Congratulations, Clemente.
Thank you.
Yes, he worked for 20 years as a journalist for the Daily News, for ABC, for the New York Post, and this is his third book on the topic of soccer. And I've been reading this book for about a week on my commutes to and from Long Island, and it is absolutely delightful. It's beautifully written, and I feel like I've been traveling the whole world just by reading this book. I mean, I've been Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Italy, South Africa, Qatar, they're all in this book. And also, another extraordinary thing about this book is you really get a whole sweep of the 20th century. The Great Depression, Mussolini, Hitler, World War II, Nelson Mandela, they all form part of this story. And Clemente has just a brilliant way of weaving together the great events of the last century with this game of soccer. So it's quite an achievement. Now, Clemente, at the very beginning of the book, you say something provocative. You say that soccer is the world's biggest religion. So I want you to explain that.
Thanks for having me. I want to thank first the marketing team here at Valeria for putting this together, including our team, Paul Gladder, who couldn't be here. He wants everyone to know he's not here because he has COVID. And nothing could keep Paul from being here. So I want to thank Paul for everything he's done for me, for Bob for pinch hitting at the last minute, to use a baseball reference. And Eleni and Leo too for making this happen. So thank you for that. Okay, and my family is here, so thanks to them. My daughter, my wife, and my parents are here. First time at King's for 3 of the 4. My daughter's been here before. That's what happens when school's closed and King's is open. Okay. Yeah, it's a provocative point I make, but I think it's true in the sense that, sure, Christianity is the largest faith in the world, and Islam is a big growing religion in other parts of the world. But I think what brings all these people together is soccer. And everywhere I've traveled, you tell them where you're from, and you say, I'm from the United States, or I'm from Italy, or wherever, and people just start talking to you. I think it does bring people together. I think oftentimes we equate soccer with fan violence, with tribalism, which happens obviously in any sport. But I do think for the most part, soccer is a positive and a binding experience. And if you've been to other countries, I think the fervor around the sport is very much the religious one. Unlike any sport in the United States, the only thing I liken it to in the United States is college football. That's the only other religion, especially in the South, where I think people get put on they put on the war paint, and they take off their shirts and they go out and then they really love their school and it represents their region. I think the same goes for whether you're cheering for a local team, like in your town. If you've ever been to the Boca Juniors or ever played, a game in Buenos Aires, or if you're watching, Brazil playing at the World Cup. I'm sure, I always tell people when you're traveling in the summer, when the World Cup normally happens, and you don't even know the World Cup is happening, and then you end up in Brazil and no one's working, or you end up in Italy and everyone's just busy doing something else, you realize, oh, this is a big deal here. So.
Yes, did you play soccer?
Yeah, I did. Not great, not well. I did. I was like the best 8-year-old in the world, but then I got to high school and I realized, wow, there's some pretty good players out here. And I know we talked about this before because we're dads. And when I was growing up, there wasn't all this travel, sports. Don't get me started. So it was harder to do, but it was interesting because I grew up in New York near the UN, and we had sort of our own international group of friends, and soccer was a big deal to those kids, and we played in the park when nobody else was doing it back then. And so I grew up playing, and I played in high school, and at that point, my life took me a different way, and I thought, oh, maybe I can write about sports, and I wanted to be a sports writer, and that never really happened either. I ended up becoming a news writer, and sports always became a thing I did on the side. So.
Yeah. Yes, and you write in your book about your first World Cup, in Italy.
Yeah.
So that was one of my favorite chapters.
Yeah,
So.
my dad told that story to a bunch of people here already, but now we're here. Yeah, I was 6 years old, and we were on vacation in Naples, Italy. And if you know anything about Naples, it's a pretty crazy soccer place, among other crazy things they do there. But we were there that summer, 1982, when Italy won the World Cup, so anybody here old enough to remember that. And it was just a pretty crazy experience. I couldn't believe what was going on. People were crying and throwing things, and people were in squares celebrating and waving flags, and it was, when you're really young, things are really impressionable on you, whether they're negative or positive. And this really stuck out to me, like, oh, this is amazing. The sport is not just what's happening on the field, it's all this extra cultural and nationalistic sort of fervor around it, and I really got into it from that moment on. So.
How old were you?
I was 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just a kid.
Yeah. And what year was that?
1982.
Okay.
So you can do the math out.
Yes.
A lot of journalism students here, so math is not a strength.
I just have a question about that screen. Is there someone that needs to start a meeting? Is there a Zoom?
We're not broadcasting.
Oh, you're not broadcasting. Okay. Okay. I just checking. How did the World Cup get started?
So the World Cup got started in 1930, so it's almost 100 years old. And I think a lot of Americans are new to the World Cup, so they maybe watched 4 years ago, or 8 years ago, or 10 years ago. So they're new to soccer. America is fairly new to soccer in terms of the global community. And so World Cup got started in 1930, and the idea was, let's create the ultimate international sports competition, right? At the time, the biggest thing there was the Olympics. And so the Olympic champion would really be the world champion. And in the 1920s, Uruguay was the greatest football nation, soccer nation on the planet. And it still is a pretty competitive nation. It's pretty incredible for a country of about 3 million people. It's very small. And so 1930, Uruguay hosted the World Cup, and it was all held in one city, Montevideo. Teams from Europe had to travel by ship. And the United States actually finished 3rd at that World Cup, which has now lost to history. Because soccer in the 1930s was kind of a big deal in the United States, and then it was sort of overtaken by the popularity of football, American football.
So what's wrong with the Olympics? Why can't we just watch the Olympics? Why do we need a World Cup?
Right.
If they play soccer in the Olympics.
Yeah, so soccer is still played at the Olympics, and on the women's side, professionals do compete. But on the men's side, present day, there's an agreement with FIFA to have, it's a youth tournament. So basically players under 23 years old play at the Olympics, because that would take away from the power of the World Cup. I think they wanted their own tournament, and they didn't want to get lost in, at the Olympics, soccer is one of, 50 or 40 sports, depending on what's going on. And so that gets lost, and a lot of people here probably don't watch soccer at the Olympics. It gets lost in the swimming and all the other sports that are more popular at the Olympics. So, but as I say in the book, by the 1950s and 60s, television becomes a much bigger revenue generator for FIFA, and then that's when the World Cup really becomes a global event.
Yeah, so was it controversial in the beginning?
A little bit, because there was all kinds of issues with Great Britain and players being sent to the World Cup, and whether or not what constituted a professional athlete at the time and what who didn't. So if you were paid to play, then you could be at the Olympics, and the World Cup was going to get away from that. The World Cup would say, we don't care if you're paid, we want professionals to play here. The first World Cup, Italy did not travel to Uruguay, right? So then when Italy hosted in 34, 4 years later, Uruguay did not go back to defend its title. So there's a lot of politics there, right, starting to emerge between countries and soccer.
Yeah, there are several very unsavory figures that pop up in your book, including Mussolini.
Yeah.
How do dictators use sports?
Yeah, dictators love sports. We know that from the fact that Russia hosted the World Cup in 2018. China's hosted the Olympics a couple of times already, right? So this is not new. Totalitarian states love sports as a way to generate national fervor and to create a distraction, right? So for Mussolini, it was a big deal to have the World Cup in Italy, and for not only that, but for Italy to do well at that World Cup, right? Yeah. It's not good enough to just be there.
They won.
They won the World Cup, and there's people who think that was done under some kind of pressure, or referees were afraid.
Mussolini actually said, well, there's a rumor that he said he was going to kill the players. If
Yeah,
they win.
yeah.
Yes.
No, can I say one?
Yeah, yeah.
He made an offer that can refuse.
Yeah. So apparently, the rumor is, we're going to be here all night, folks. No. The rumor is that he sent them a telegram saying win or die.
Yeah.
The players years later deny that ever happened, but it's, part of the book was trying to debunk or cut through some of the legends that then kind of emerged over the decades. People kind of started inventing their own, embellishing their own stories. So.
Yeah. Is there an antidote to this pattern of dictators using these international sporting events?
No, there is no way to do that, I think, because these events cost so much money to put on that a lot of democracies are not, don't want to do that. A lot of voters don't like that. A lot of voters don't want to pay for stadiums. In democracy, when everyone has a voice, there's a lot of debate around whether we should spend the money on this or more important things like schools and hospitals, which is what happened in 2014 when Brazil hosted the World Cup. And they built this gigantic stadium in the middle of the Amazon that is now abandoned. So,
Yeah. Yes. Who's the greatest soccer player of all time?
Oh, no. Careful. So this, my book does not make that clear because I don't want to get hate mail.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be objective as possible, but, I always say if you ask me, the greatest soccer player of all time is Diego Maradona.
Oh, I was, from your book, I would have assumed you would have said Pelé.
Pelé gets a lot of attention in my book because he played in several World Cups and played very well, obviously, and won 3 of them. Though for 2 of them, he was mostly injured for them. I say Diego Maradona because if you watch the 1986 World Cup, single-handedly, one man was able to will a team to victory.
Yeah.
Right, both by cheating, the hand of God goal, and then by brilliance in the same game by passing 6 players and scoring the greatest goal ever. FIFA gave out an award in 2000 where they had an online poll who was the greatest player of all time, and that poll was won by Maradona. Mm-hmm. I voted like 12 times.
Yeah.
And then FIFA decided to give it to Pelé, but their executive committee voted Pelé, so they were co-winners, which kind of people felt kind of weird about. But, to transition to present day, people think that, whether you think it's Maradona or Pelé, doesn't matter, they think that that player's been, the player that is the best of all time is Messi, right, Lionel Messi. I disagree. I think that he needs to win the World Cup to do that. So if he wins the World Cup in Qatar in a month's time, then I'll amend my answer. But otherwise, for now, I don't think so.
And those are the co-players of the century, right?
Pelé and Maradona are.
Yes.
And Messi is the player everyone likes, but you can also say Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, if that's what you want. So.
Yes. By your account, what was the greatest upset in the history of the World Cup?
So there's been a few big ones. I think the biggest one that most people don't know about is 1950, the United States beat England at the World Cup, 1-0, and it was in Brazil. And I interviewed one of the players in the time, I think most of them have passed away at this point, and he remembers coming off the plane in New York and there was nobody there but their wives, right? So there wasn't like, nobody was watching, there was no television, nobody was listening on the radio, so it was almost an event that happened without any notice. But the English know about it, and it bodes well for the fact that England plays the United States at this World Cup in the opening rounds. We'll remind them of that.
Yes.
I always tell people, 1776, 1950. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and what country would you say has been most dominant or successful in the World Cup?
Yeah, so if the greatest player of all time is Messi almost, Maradona, then the greatest national team of all time at the World Cup is Brazil. And I don't say that because Lucas is here, who was, which gives me a chance to welcome him back because he graduated, but he also was an assistant of mine on the book, an intern, did a lot of great work, a lot of great research because he speaks Portuguese and I don't. And a lot of the photos that were in the book were chosen by him, so kudos to you. So yeah, I think Brazil is the greatest nation ever to play. They played in every World Cup. The 1970 team that featured Pelé may be the greatest World Cup team ever. And the 1982 team, Italy won that World Cup, but the greatest team from that tournament was Brazil.
Yeah.
And they didn't win it. So I would say that's the greatest team that never won it. And Brazil's a 5-time champion and a favorite to win this time again. So.
Yeah. What are some of the odd dynamics of having the World Cup in Qatar?
Well, one of them is people don't know how to pronounce it. So I say Qatar, you said Qatar.
Yes.
There was a story I saw in Yahoo News this morning. There's like 6 different pronunciations.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because the way Arabic is translated into English, right? So I've seen commercials that Qatar has put out and they say Qatar. I'm like, if they say Qatar, then I can say it. So what are some of the challenges? Well, one of them is the fact that we're talking about having a World Cup in November, which is super unusual. So you'll be watching soccer with your Thanksgiving meal, which is not normal. And it's going to be competing with the NFL and everything else. And I remember this past summer, I felt like there was a void. I'm like, the World Cup should be happening now. What's happening? So that's one challenge. The other challenge is the fact that Qatar is not a soccer nation. Right? Qatar got the World Cup under some dubious circumstances, to be polite. Both Russia in 2018 and Qatar in 2022, those World Cups are seen as tarnished by potential corruption and other backroom deals that were never really flushed out. So I can't, these are allegations that never were proven. But the fact that a country that is super small, it's never hosted a major soccer tournament and doesn't even have stadiums built, gets to host the World Cup, and then it's 120 degrees in the summer, so they realize, oh, we have to move this to November and disrupt the domestic soccer season in Europe is something FIFA definitely didn't plan on. So that's another challenge. And then the other challenge is I think the world has changed a lot in 12 years. I'm curious to see what Qatar's tolerance is for drinking, alcohol consumption. It's a Muslim nation. They do not believe in public drinking. Even when I was booking my trip there for December, they asked me, do you want a hotel with alcohol or non? So they created zones for people to drink in. I know that when I was in Russia, England got to the semifinals, and as English fans do, they drink in public and they take off their shirts and they make a lot of noise. And the Russian authorities let it go because they realized it's good money for them and these guys will be gone in a week or two. Qatar's different, and so I'm concerned about that, and I see a lot of message boards and other places where a lot of people who are LGBTQ are afraid to go. It's illegal to be gay in Qatar. I don't know how that's enforced, but there are a lot of fans who are afraid to go. So there's a lot, I think, going to happen off the field that you should definitely pay attention to once the tournament starts. I have a feeling that the tournament's going to be on Fox and Fox Sports. I don't think the companies that bid to air the World Cup are going to do a lot of journalism around what's happening off the field because it might not make the country look good. This is basically a free commercial for Qatar for 30 days. And I already see commercials for Qatar's tourism board for months. And I know you went to Africa this summer and you went through Doha on a connection flight, and you said the airport there was...
Oh, it's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary airline, extraordinary airport.
Yeah, I was on a conference call with a bunch of journalists last week talking about my book, and they were from Africa and South America. And they all traveled recently, and they all said how they had to cut through Doha.
Yes.
So I think all the airlines are using that as a place to as a layover because it's money, right? It's money. It's a lot. Soccer is a really enjoyable sport. It's a lot of passion, but there's so much money behind the scenes. It's pretty crazy.
Well, yeah, and they keep you in the airport for like 18 hours, so you spend a lot of money in the airport.
Right. An 18-hour layover where you have to do stuff there.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Who do you expect to win this year?
These are all hard questions. I waver on this, but I'm going to say Argentina. But I do think it's going to be a country that's going to break the European domination because Europe has won it now. So I think it's going to be either Brazil or Argentina will get to the final. Yeah. Everyone's dream final is Argentina-Portugal because it's Ronaldo versus Messi. I don't think Portugal can get that far. But the thing we should focus on is people love forecasting, but journalists' job is really to try to report what's happening now and not what's going to happen. Because trust me, I've been wrong before. And so I'll find wrong this time, only on video. So you can play the tape back on December 18th and see what happens.
One of the most shocking parts of your book was your description of the corruption. I mean, it was a small part of your book, but it was shocking how rotten the people at the top have been in FIFA.
Yeah, and that's something that is really only come up forward in the last decade.
Yeah.
Right? So FIFA's realized by the 1970s there was a lot of money in the World Cup and in soccer in general, but the World Cup is the tournament that they make their most money off of. So much so they were thinking of making it every 2 years, because the ATM machine is just too good for it, and most countries voted against it, or actually protested against that, because it would water down the product. But what ended up happening was there was a series of illegal activities occurring in the early 2000s when nations bid on the World Cup. Because 24 members of the executive committee award the World Cup, it's very easy to corrupt 11 of them.
Yeah.
And corrupt, I mean like you wine and dine them, you fly them all over the world, you put them in nice hotels, which is what the Russians and the Qataris did. And they got elected, you know.
And there was some money exchanging hands too.
Yeah, there was money exchanging hands, and it wasn't until 2015 when Obama was president that Loretta Lynch and the DOJ investigated it. And you might say, well, what's the DOJ doing investigating FIFA? Because they used some banks in Miami, and once those illegal transactions occur on American soil, the DOJ gets involved. Some people said it was because the US didn't get the World Cup in 2018, that the US government was retaliating. Trust me, nobody in this country cares about getting the World Cup as much as Russia and Qatar did. So this is no retaliation, this was just illegal. And there were a bunch of FIFA members were arrested on racketeering charges, conspiracy, you know, the kind of stuff that the mafia gets arrested for. And there was a whistleblower named Chuck Blazer, who was an American, and they caught him, and then he decided to turn on everybody else. And he's famous for, I remember meeting him a couple of times, because whenever I would go to like a big game or a big tournament, he'd be there, and he was a very large man, a very large white beard, like Santa Claus. He had an apartment in Trump Tower, and across from his apartment, he had a second apartment for his cats. Right? That's how much money this guy had. And they used to call him Mr. 10%, because every time there was a deal made, he got 10% off the top.
Yeah.
So he turned on them and wore a wire and brought down everybody else. He's since passed away. He died a couple of years ago. But that blew a big hole into FIFA. The president had to resign in the mid-2015, 2016. And they're on the road now, they say, to be more transparent. But it's a nonprofit organization. It makes billions of dollars. They're located in Switzerland, where there's very little oversight. It's not easy to police an organization that has zero oversight. I kind of, you know, during the pandemic, somebody put on Twitter a Twitter poll, which is the most corrupt organization in the world, and it was like the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, FIFA, or the WHO.
Yes.
And I was like, pick your pick.
Yeah.
So, but it's FIFA.
How does FIFA, or how does the World Cup compare to the NFL and the Olympics when it comes to things like attendance, global TV viewers, net worth of the event?
Right. So I don't have all those figures at hand, but the figure I do have is that the France-Croatia World Cup final 4 years ago was watched by 1 billion people, with a B. Okay? And even the Super Bowl that has a global reach may get 200, 300, 400 million people. Right? And the NFL is trying to become more global by having games in London and in Mexico and in Canada. But you know, if anywhere you go around the world, I write in the book, you know, next time you go on vacation somewhere around the world, it's a good likelihood you get hit in the head with a soccer ball, because of just the number of people that are playing the sport. So no, it doesn't compare. The Olympics, of course, is much watered down because of so many different events. The World Cup, you know, people have said to me, oh, it's not the world's biggest sporting event. You have that in the title. I'm like, it is. Just look at the math, do the numbers. Yeah. And it is. And then by the revenue they make on television deals and on ticket revenue, it's unprecedented.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I was telling Clemente, my two boys went with me to Kenya this summer and volunteered in a remote village in an orphanage, and they did not speak. The kids spoke a tribal language. We couldn't communicate at all with them, but my boys played soccer with these kids 6 hours a day,
right? And
through soccer, that was their language,
right?
Of common language. They got to know each other. They bonded, and their soccer balls were made of discarded plastic garbage bags tied tight together with rope.
Right.
They didn't, you know, that's.
Right. That's how most of the people in the world play. Soccer is a sport for the poor, generally. Yeah. In the United States, it's a very rich suburban sport, but it's not the case in South Africa or in Brazil or anywhere else. But it's a good segue. When when Bob told me that story, it kind of touched me a little bit. I thought, oh, wow, what an interesting place. I told my family about this trip to Kenya. They were all excited about hearing about this place. And I thought, okay, you know what, I'm going to sell 10 books here today, and that's $300 worth of books. I'm going to donate all of that to the orphanage in Kenya. So if you buy a book, all that money will go to them. And I said, oh, we'll buy them soccer balls. And you said, no.
They do very well with their plastic bags, making the soccer balls themselves. But what they really need is cooking oil. The war in Ukraine has absolutely devastated the economy of East Africa.
And so I said, as an Italian American, I can get cooking oil.
Yes.
So I said, yeah, I'm all for that. So the money today will go to them, and then Bob will make sure the money's wired to them. So I appreciate that, and you told me your story. So.
Well, thank you. I'm going to open up for the audience. Is Leo?
Where's Leo?
Oh, Leo, yes. Leo has a mic.
Shadows.
Hello.
Hey.
Congratulations again on the book.
Thank you. This is Eric. He's a former colleague of mine at the New York Post.
We know each other for a while.
We know each other a long time.
Just going back to the host country, so what's it going to be like on the ground, do you think, in Qatar for fans, the fan experience? And then how would you notice it at home? Are we going to have empty stadiums? Do you think it's going to be just less boisterous? What should we expect as a fan experience?
Yeah, so interesting. It's a good question. So I think at home, you won't notice anything. I think you'll notice that it's a great event. I think the stadiums will be pretty full. I think the local population's into it. And I think the entire Middle East is really into it. When South Africa hosted in 2010, it really was a World Cup for the entire continent. I think this is like for the entire region. So I think that's fine. I think that'll be fine. I think it'll be troublesome from when Westerners go there. And there were all these rules. They said there was no drinking in the stadiums, and Budweiser was a big sponsor. It's like, I don't think it's going to happen. So they're like, okay, we'll have certain spots in the stadium where you can drink. And then they issued a ruling recently saying, oh, fans can't take off their shirts. It's going to be 85 degrees, and soccer fans do all kinds of crazy things because you can't be shirtless in Qatar. That's going to be all. Who's going to police that? And are we going to see police enforcing this with hordes of fans? It could become troublesome. I don't think you'll notice that at home, though. I think you'll notice it there. The other thing I noticed is if you look at travel agents and all these different tour operators, you want to go to the World Cup and you want to go for a week and you want to buy tickets and get hotels, it's like $10,000 a person. This is not for like every fan. This is for people with a lot of money. And so this is the kind of thing where people with a lot of money are going to go to the World Cup and enjoy it, but it's not going to be for the fan who just wants to. When I was in Russia, I remember there were England fans that just flew in for the day and then flew back to England, and that's not going to happen here because Qatar won't even give you a visa for just one day, right? Everybody has to go to Qatar with a visa, and they have to do a background check on you, which is all very creepy, but it's what it is, So yeah.
Thanks so much, Clemente. If I can just ask an unsophisticated American question, what's your take? I know this is almost a cliche question about the popularity of soccer in this country.
Right.
It does seem like MLS and their subdivision, the name of which I can't remember.
The USL.
Right.
Yeah.
Is flourishing in some places around the country, but on the other hand, I think it still doesn't compare to our other professional sports. Do you have any insights on that? Or maybe, you said you didn't want to prognosticate. Do you see you see it growing, or is it sort of permanently a minority concern in this country?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Is soccer a niche sport? Will it always remain that way, or will it break into the big four? Look, I think the internet allowed soccer to grow in this country in a way that maybe never would have been able to happen in the last 30 years. And 30 years ago, the question wasn't about how popular soccer is. It was basically two camps. One was we hate soccer, and the other camp was we love soccer, but it's going to be an ethnic sport for people that come from other countries. That's all changed now, I think, with the fact that you can watch 60, 70 games a week on TV. I'm sure people here watch the Premier League, or they watch the Champions League, and they watch that every day. That's part of their sports diet. Younger people love soccer. And I always tell people, if there's an MLS city coming to your city, it means that your rent is going to go up. Because it's all these hip cities like Austin, and Nashville, and Columbus, Ohio, and all these places that young people want to live in downtown and take the train to the game and all that. If you look at who goes to soccer games, it's very much a millennial Gen Z thing. And if you look at who goes to women's soccer games, It's like little girls with their dads, right? So will MLS break through? MLS has to compete with the Premier League for your time. And that's difficult because no other league around the world has to do that. So, but I think MLS is 27 years old now. MLS has made it, I think. And a lot of players play in MLS that play in the national team, and a lot of players from around the world play in MLS. Most famously, David Beckham came here in 2007, and it gave some credibility to the league. So soccer's made it. I don't think it's a question of will it make it. It's already made it. Is it as big as baseball? I don't know, but baseball ratings are pretty bad, right? And the only behemoth is the NFL. That's the big sport, and I think that'll be interesting to see how the World Cup competes with the NFL during the winter, because that'll be the first time we'll ever see that. That's a good question. I hope I answered it. It's a more complicated question. It's not more about predicting. It's more about looking at what's happening right now. And I think right now, everyone in this room has either watched the Premier League once, or been to an MLS game, or been to a women's national team game, or at least watched it on television, which is more than I can say 30 years ago. This room would, because there was no satellite, no streaming services. You didn't have that opportunity. So that's my long-winded answer.
Lisi, congrats on the book.
Thank you.
I want to ask you about your feelings and how you feel about Italy not being part of the World Cup.
You had to go there.
Yeah.
Italy did not make the World Cup, and they didn't make it 4 years ago either, which is an anomaly, right? So FIFA is going to enlarge the World Cup to 48 teams in 4 years for money-making purposes, and I think Italy cannot. With 48 teams, Italy will make it, right? Everyone will make it. But Italy has to qualify out of Europe, which is much harder to do than in other parts of the world. But I had the United States to fall back on, so I root for both teams. So there's always a backup, so I'm not worried. But the good thing about it is my stress level will be totally reduced. So that's a good thing. And we made a deal with the devil. We won the Euros last year, so can't win them all. So, good question.
Just to piggyback off the previous two questions, you said USA is your backup, and obviously, like America.
Everyone in this room, the U.S. is their backup. Everyone's
Right.
either Mexican or Ecuadorian or Chilean or English or whatever. So.
No, but obviously, the fan base here in the U.S. is going crazy as the sport grows here as well. And
Right.
you see World Cup posters, and it's Messi, Ronaldo, Neymar, and they throw Pulisic in there for some reason.
Right.
But I just want to get your opinion. How well do you think the USA is going to do, especially if they get England and Wales right away in the first round?
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to make it out? And if they do, how far?
Yeah, I have them coming out of the group as a second place team. I think they can beat Wales and Iran. And when the U.S. plays teams, it's always very geopolitical. I mean, the U.S.-Iran game is going to be like a big deal. And I remember, Wales got into the World Cup on a tiebreaker with Ukraine. And if Ukraine had been in the group, it would have been Ukraine, England, and Iran, which would have been a geopolitical nightmare. And also, people would have been rooting for Ukraine, right, because of sentimental reasons. So I was kind of happy that Wales got in for that reason. But I think the U.S. can finish second. The U.S. is a very young team. They're the youngest team at the World Cup. The average age is about 22, 23. And I think they're using this tournament to get out of the group. And then after that, you never know what could happen in the World Cup because it's a knockout round. But I should prelude that the U.S. will host the World Cup in 4 years, co-host it with Mexico and Canada. And so these guys will be 26, 27 years old, and they'll be in their prime. So I think you have to look at the long game a little bit. But I think they can go. I think they can do well. Let's hope so, because the better they do, the more people are interested in the sport. It's in the media and the news for longer. So.
Congratulations, Professor.
Thank you.
Lisi. I'll be looking forward to reading this hopefully sometime or watching the tournament.
Yeah. 18 days.
18 days, yeah.
Who's counting?
I said just a comment and then a question for you. I took a brief peek at your description of the 2014 qualifier, the quarterfinal in Brazil, and I appreciated what you did what you said about the Chileans and the Brazilians. The Brazilians were scared, and we almost took them out.
Yes.
And in the last 90 years, we've yet to beat them in the qualifier. So salute to. here's my question for you. In Europe, who are your favorite club teams in Europe, and who are your favorite club teams in South America?
You mean to watch, to
Yeah, your favorite
root for?
club teams, yeah.
Yeah, so, sentimentally, I'm attached to Napoli, which is the team from Italy, of course. And Maradona did play for them, so maybe that's why my answer is a little bit biased. And they're actually one of the best teams in the world at the moment. At least they're playing that way. We'll see what happens long term. But teams I enjoy watching in Europe, I really enjoy watching Real Madrid. They're just full of talent and just a lot of fun to watch. I like Liverpool. I like last season's Liverpool more than this season's. But they play a really great game, and the English play a great game. And the Premier League is a wonderful product. If you watch the Premier League, it's incredible, and how that's become the best league in the world. South America, I love South American soccer. I don't think it gets the respect on the club level that it should by American audiences, because everyone's too busy watching the Premier League. But I do like the Argentine league. I think it's totally off the wall crazy. And so I do watch that. And I do like Boca Juniors, because I think there's a lot of passion there. Another Maradona team, right? So, maybe I'm biased. My wife will get upset at me, but on our honeymoon, we went to Argentina, and it was a love affair with Maradona, and my wife just happened to be there. So yeah, I had to go pray at the altar of Diego Maradona. Right? So she tolerated it. I promised to take her back and not do any of that. So, but my daughter and I talk about soccer all the time, and sometimes my wife will say, "It sounds like you guys are speaking a totally different language. It's English, but I have no idea what you're saying." So, but those are the teams I kind of enjoy the most. And what I do like to watch a lot, I don't watch as much as I used to, is because I grew up with no cable TV, so I just watch a lot of Telemundo and Univision, and I watch a lot of Mexican soccer. And Club America I like a lot. So, so I watched a lot of Mexican soccer too. So, good question.
On the topic of Diego Maradona,
Yeah.
You say he's the best player because in the World Cup he had the God-hand goal and he took like.
Well, not just that. I mean,
Yes. But Messi accomplished the exact same thing in a very similar fashion, and I would argue that he hasn't won the World Cup, which would not make him the best player, but statistically, Messi has been the most consistent player. So why can't you argue that he's the best player?
Yeah, for me, the best player in the world has to win the World Cup. Not to be on the Mount Rushmore of soccer, like he's on there, but to be the best, the greatest of all time, right? I think you have to win a World Cup. It's just, I understand, the Champions League in a lot of ways has replaced the World Cup in terms of power, right, and prestige. And soccer, you're right. If you look at the statistics, Messi has scored more goals and more assists, and I get all that. But I think soccer is a passion game, and I don't really care for the numbers. Right, I don't really care that it's not baseball when we look at averages. I like the fact that people are passionate about a player or a team, and I don't care how many passes they put together or how many assists they had or that kind of thing. I look at what they do sort of globally. And so I think Maradona did that. I think if you ask Argentines, they'll say Maradona, I think. But the big joke I always tell is that if you ask Argentines who the greatest player of all time is, they'll say Maradona. If you ask Brazilians who the best player of all time is, they'll say Pelé, and then in secret they'll tell you it's Maradona. Right, Lucas? No, they'll say it's Ronaldo or Romario or somebody else. So, that's true. Any other questions? We have like 10 minutes. So we'll have a little bit of time.
A follow-up right here.
Follow up.
Soccer has grown tremendously.
Because you've been in this country a while, so you know.
Soccer is a religion for me, so. And I follow it. I've been here a while. I came here in '79. The first World Cup that I remember as a young kid, where we watched and we were crying, was the '82 World Cup.
Right.
I think Chile got beat 10-1. It was in Spain, so I cried as a little kid. So there you go. Right? Here's a question for you. From 1994, and I remember going to a few of the games at Giant Stadium. I got to see the Stoichkov goal.
Yeah, the Bulgaria, Germany was Bulgaria, Germany.
It was phenomenal. The growth of soccer since that time to now has been amazing. My question to you is, what do you see for the next 30 years of soccer here in the U.S.? Given all the growth that we have, and now given social media and all the things, what do you see for soccer going forward?
Yeah, no, I can see in 30 years' time that soccer is the biggest sport in the United States, or among that top 2 or 3. Now, it might not be Major League Soccer, but I think in terms of eyeballs and TV ratings and that kind of thing, I do think it can be that. I think it can easily displace hockey and baseball. You know, I think the average age of the baseball fan is 49, okay? That's not ideal for a sports league. So I do think soccer can enter that category. I know that 30 years ago, if you even mentioned that, people would be laughing in this room if that was 30 years ago. No one's laughing now. So I do. And then the other thing that is happening in this country that is not happening anywhere else, really, we're ahead of the game, is women's soccer. It's grown in a way that is tremendous. And kudos to the women for winning so many titles. And then, you know, they're going to have the Women's World Cup next summer in Australia, New Zealand. So, you know, and we're competitive there. But now the rest of the world is catching up to the U.S. women because they realize, oh, there's audience here, there's growth for women's soccer in England and in Spain and South America and other parts of the world. So, yeah, no, I definitely think it'll be top 3. I mean, I can easily see it displacing, like I said, hockey and baseball over time. Because I think a lot of people are growing up with soccer being a big part of their lives. The thing that's different is that a lot of kids today play soccer and then leave the sport to play basketball or football or even baseball. You know, in this country, your best players are not growing up to be soccer players. They're growing up to play the NBA, right? So I think in other countries, that's not the case. So I think we need to hone in on that. The other issue that may hinder that is that in this country, soccer is a real big pay-to-play situation, right? You need money to play soccer. You want to be on a travel team, you pay $3,000 a year. When the best soccer players in the world are playing on a dirt field somewhere for nothing, and we need to scout those players because that's what's happening in Brazil and in the suburbs of Paris where the best French players come from, right? They're not playing on these manicured fields in the suburbs. So I do think we need to get away from that a little bit and get to a point where we do more sandlot type soccer. Because I think we'll be able to compete with the rest of the world. You know, Iceland, over a decade ago, built free soccer fields all over the place. And within 10 years, Iceland made the World Cup, 2018, right? So it can be done. When the US didn't qualify, that was a big question. Like, why aren't the best players playing on the team? Why aren't there enough Hispanics, Latinos on the team? You know, it's a country full of Latinos, and there are very few, if none, on the national team, right? Why are we not chasing these players who then take on a passport of their parents and play for Mexico, right? So we need to make sure that we're bringing these players in and creating a little bit of a more soccer ecosystem. You know, at the time, U.S. Soccer argued, well, you know, everything in America is, if you want violin lessons, you have to pay for that. So soccer is the same way. I think that's a bit of a hindrance. So, yeah, Lucas.
Since I moved here, I noticed, of course, that soccer has been very, very popular. But what I noticed as well is like a lot of the, you know, guys that I talk to and girls, they support the teams in Europe.
Right.
You know, I never met anyone who said, oh, I support like Inter Miami. They never say
Right, then no one's out the Red Bulls.
Like, they can watch it, they can go to the stadium, but they will never say that they support it. And I have my team in Brazil, probably no one ever known about it, but like I grew up like supporting and like loving the club.
Right.
And that really helped me to fall in love with the sport and, you know, my country's like all about soccer.
Right.
So how do you feel that U.S. can change to make people here like their clubs here? Because I feel like only then soccer will be really, really popular.
Yeah, you make a good point. I think even some of the players who play on MLS teams who make the national team are maligned. Oh, we have this guy playing in Europe, just pick him, you know, get him. You know, he plays for a team in England no one heard of, but he's playing there, so he must be better than people playing here. I don't believe that, you know. But I've been to Red Bull games with my daughter, and you know, they're almost sold out. There's people that go to these games, but it's very small. It's very niche, you know. And what annoys me the most is, like we'll go to Red Bulls games and we'll watch them. It's fun, and then you know, someone, actually my exterminator of all people said to me, "Oh, I went to Red Bull Arena. I saw Barcelona play the Red Bulls. Yeah, I'd never been there before." I was like, wow, Barcelona had to come here for you to go to New Jersey to watch the Red Bulls. So you're right, that's true. Like, he was never gonna go see the Red Bulls play Inter Miami. He doesn't care about that. So I think you need, more marketing behind it, and you need more superstars here, and hopefully that'll happen. But you don't want to bring in a lot of aging players here either, otherwise you turn into the old North American Soccer League where Pelé and all these players were here, but they were basically became a retirement league. You don't want that either. So it's going to take time. You know, MLS is only 26 years old, still young. If you look at the other sports leagues are 100, right? So it'll take time. But I think it'll happen eventually. If the United States can go far in the World Cup, then people will start getting interested in watching, and the further they go, the more people are into it. So hopefully it turns like a March Madness where people aren't working, they're just too busy glued to their TV sets, so, you know. I think we have time for one more. Come on, someone close us out. Yeah, come on.
I don't know if you'll like this.
Maybe I should have gone this side of the room.
What do you say to Americans who complain about what they call flopping?
Oh, are you asking me that because I'm Italian?
I'm a barbarian for asking that question.
Because I'm Italian, you're asking me that. No.
No. Is that part of the beauty of the game? Is it strategy?
I should say yes, just because I'm a romantic, but it is part of the beauty, but it's terrible.
Okay.
It's terrible, I will admit. I remember seeing a guy with a shirt once, and it had photos of the Italian national team, and it said, Italian diving team. It was like the sign, because that's the big joke. But I think in soccer, players have to exaggerate some of the injuries to get the attention of the referee, which doesn't always happen in other sports. Now they have instant replay and other things I think players are better at. I'm looking at Lucas because I remember in 2018, Neymar, who's probably one of the greatest Brazilians ever, he would just make all these over-the-top, falling around, rolling around. It became like a joke, it became like a meme. And so I think there's an art to doing it, but not overdoing it. So, not that I think soccer coaches don't teach that, but I think, even my dad when I was a kid was like, look, if someone just touches you, just fall on the ground, grab your ankle, roll around, and the referee will blow the whistle. They also do it because they do it in the box to get a penalty kick. Now they have VAR, which is instant replay. It's much harder to fool the referees now, so there's less of that now, but I do think for American audiences, they don't get that at all. Like, well, why is this happening? So, but no, it's a good question. It doesn't make me mad, it's just the reality, so.
Well, thank you so.
Oh, we got one more? Oh, okay, one more. There's a class here after, no. Which I'm speaking in, but.
On the topic of flopping, 2014 Mexico versus the Netherlands, was it a penalty, yes or no?
Oh, that was a penalty.
Sorry.
No, if VAR was around, it would not have been a penalty. And VAR was around, the hand that got goal never would have happened, right? So I like VAR, but I also like some of these legendary, and I do like the thing about soccer that we can argue about this forever and nobody is right, no one's wrong. We can just argue about it forever, so. So thank you all for coming. Enjoy the World Cup. I have a few books left over if you're interested in them.